So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us in this third and final conversation with Interdimension TV and The Cycle. The Cycle is on a mission to strengthen people and the planet through the empowerment of women. They believe gender equality is a key to a thriving world and focus on providing safe and sustainable water, sanitation, and hygiene services and improving menstrual health conditions. They work with communities to gain local knowledge, to listen and provide solutions that last. So my name is Lauren Ekstrom. I am the co-founder of Interdimension TV, and I am honored to be here in conversation today with the CEO of The Cycle, Padma Priya, who has been doing this work for more than 20 years with organizations such as CARE and Save the Children UK, as well as Lenice Brothers, who is a yoga teacher, registered nutritionist, author of You Can Have a Better Period, and host of the Period Story podcast. Right now, you can join Interdimension TV or participate in any of our online trainings and enter the code CYCLE, CYCLE, and 50% of your purchase is going to go directly to helping this incredible organization. And this conversation today with Lenice and Priya is really geared to help support all of us on a global scale in deepening our menstrual education and understanding of how we can support each other as a collective on all sides of the gender spectrum. So today I'd love to start with Lenice. One part that we haven't spoken about in these conversations is really the impact of nutrition. And with your expertise in that area, I would love to hear a little bit about your perspective on the impact of nutrition and hormones and the menstrual cycle, and what you think some of the important practices are for people to be aware of, or the practices that maybe we don't even think about.
Yeah, so nutrition is so important for a healthy, not only a healthy period, but a healthy menstrual cycle. We can think of the foods that we eat and the nutrients from the foods that we eat almost like the scaffolding for our hormones and the rest of the body parts that help us have a better period and have a better menstrual cycle. So if you think about the way that the menstrual cycle works, splitting into four phases. So you have your period, then you have the next phase, which we can kind of liken to spring. So our follicular phase, then you have ovulation, our inner summer, and then you have the luteal phase, so our inner autumn. Every phase, there are different things going on in the body. Our hormones are rising and falling depending on which phase we're in. And in every phase, there are foods that we can add in to help give our body a bit of a helping hand. So, for example, when we have our periods, a lot of us have either painful periods, heavy periods, or we just generally feel really sluggish or lethargic. And there's a lot that we can do through food to give our bodies a bit of a boost. So, for example, if energy is an issue during your period, you probably want to look at adding in foods with iron. So if you eat red meat, like lamb, for example, that's a great food to add in. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, you're looking at adding in iron-based, plant-based iron foods, such as lentils, chickpeas, broccoli, kale, and eating those alongside vitamin C and copper foods like citrus, for example, to help maximize the benefit of that iron in the body. If, say, to support ovulation, because when we think about our menstrual cycle, a lot of us tend to think about our period as a kind of as the focal point, but really the midway point, ovulation, is actually where we need to be focusing, because that's how when we ovulate, we make progesterone, and that's like the hormone that counterbalances estrogen. And the foods that we eat and also our lifestyle, managing stress, helps our body ovulate and make enough progesterone. So, for example, this time of the year, we're getting, depending on where you are in the planet, if you're in the kind of northern hemisphere, it's summer. So you're getting a lot of vitamin D from the sun. Vitamin D is so important for healthy ovulation. And we actually absorb the most vitamin D from the sun versus the food that we eat. So that's an easy way from a lifestyle perspective to support your period and to support your wider menstrual cycle, because it's all linked. Everything that you do in one phase, everything that you add in will also benefit another phase. So there's a lot that you can do through nutrition to support your menstrual cycle.
Thank you so much. And Priya, I'm curious how the cycle views this aspect of it, because, you know, sometimes we're talking about populations that have, I think about myself. I'm living in Los Angeles, California. I can walk into a grocery store or a farmer's market and year round have access that is unparalleled in terms of the course of history and other places in the world. But that's not the truth for the majority of the planet. And I know I've spent time traveling through India and other places in the world, and what's available is seasonal, right? It's appropriate for the season that's there. And I'm curious because the cycle has done so much in terms of supporting local farming practices and sustainable farming practices and other things within the communities, how nutrition plays a part in some of the work that you guys are doing, and maybe even some of the research.
Thank you for asking this very, very significant question, Lauren, because we work with the vulnerable communities, for the poorest of the poor who cannot, like when you talk about iron supplements, getting dates or getting things that are expensive in the market is out of reach for most of them, which is why we kind of, when we do the trainings, when we do the awareness exercises with adolescent girls and the vulnerable women in the communities, we try and see what is it that would be available to them easily without them having to spend a lot of money to acquire. So for iron, we would be talking about moringa, because you know the drumstick plant is something that will grow in the wilderness in almost all villages. And collecting moringa leaves early in the morning and boiling it, drinking it as a soup with probably jaggery, which again is, you know, it helps to absorb the iron, is something that will help them immensely. Similarly, we would talk to them about lemon, because lemon is commonly available in villages and there are a lot of trees which have lemon. So taking either lemon juice or taking lemon in the form of a pickle while they are having the moringa makes the body absorb the iron better. Again, seasonal fruits. Lenise was very beautifully talking about the various seasons of the body. Similarly, you know, the fruits are also, the fruits that grow in those seasons are basically, they have the immunity that is required for any diseases or any infections that will come up during that season. Now, this is what we try to reinforce to those people, because a lot of vulnerable communities think that taking apples is good for their body, because an apple a day keeps the doctor away, is what all of us have learned in school. But in reality, you know, purchasing an apple or buying even a single apple every day is really expensive for them. So that's when we go and tell them that it's not necessary you need to have an apple which does not grow in the part of the world that we live in. We could do with guava, we could do with you know, gooseberry, we could do with other supplements that will give us all the vitamins that our body requires without us having to plan to spend a lot of money. So very often it is a question of you know, children becoming anemic simply because they are not looking at whatever food or whatever ingredients are available in their own kitchens, and they think they don't have the affordability to purchase all those fancy things, which are good to have if they had the money to buy them, but they really don't have to lose out on anything simply because they don't have to have, they don't have the purchasing part to buy those things. Merely with things that are available in their neighborhood and with taking seasonal fruits, they can keep themselves healthy and active, not just during their periods, but also for their overall health and well-being. That's what we teach them all about.
And I think this is such an important reminder for anybody that's listening to this conversation, which is that we have options, right? Some of us have the option maybe of supplementing in certain ways. I know I do, and that's a big part of my health and care routine. But it is also important to remember that maybe as the world changes or our economic status changes, that we always have options wherever we find ourselves, that we forget this planet, our ultimate mother, she provides what we need season to season. And we're so quick in this culture that has become this global culture that's become so much about commoditization and production and buying things, that we forget that really it could just be in our backyards. I know for us in the last year, we started growing a garden. And like Lanice was talking about, some of these big leafy greens, like now I can grow this in my garden, and you don't need a lot of space to do that. So, my real hope is that so many of us as women can come back to some of these practices that maybe we had generations and generations ago, of supporting not just our health, but the health of our families and our communities. And Lanice, you really touched on something that I didn't realize until I was probably in my late 20s or 30s, which is that we have this beautiful cycle that's happening every single month. And you described it so metaphorically with the different seasons of the year. And I'll just speak from a Western perspective. And I even had this conversation recently with a friend who has a teenage daughter who has started, potentially having sex. And right away, we get them on birth control because we're so afraid that, we're going to get pregnant, and the weight of that on women. But as a result, I know that the same was true for me. I never knew about these different phases that I was going through and their potential for maybe uplifting certain things or how to take better care of myself. And I'm curious, from both of you, what are the practices during these 4 different phases that are helpful to people who have a menstrual cycle as they go through these different phases? What are some of the practices that are important for us to maybe consider and come back to that we've long forgotten?
I think it's really powerful to firstly tune in to your body and meet your body where it is. So a lot of us live in this 24-hour cycle, which is very masculine, where we have this peak of energy in the morning and then it gradually declines throughout the day. But your menstrual cycle could be anywhere between 21 to 35 days. And there's a whole cycle of energy, of hormones, lots of other things within that time period that once you tune into it, it can change your life because you move away from this 24-hour cycle, which is very associated with, how we work in offices. Basically, like our modern society has been built around this 24-hour cycle. But when you step out of that a little bit and you honor, for example, your energy based on where you are in the different seasons and the phases that I mentioned earlier, it can be really kind of like quite phenomenal, because instead of rushing through your period, which so many of us, we just tend to push on, if you just turn down the volume, even 1%, it can change your energy across the rest of the cycle, because you're not going into the rest of your cycle after you finish your period feeling depleted because you haven't taken that moment to rest. And equally, when we ovulate, that's a peak of our energy. But many of us take that as a kind of blank check to just, go, 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 go. When really we use that as a time to be mindful about our energy and kind of think of it a bit like a bank where you can't just take out, you have to put back in to that bank of energy. You're making deposits as well as withdrawals. So really honoring your energy throughout all phases of the menstrual cycle and really thinking about it truly as a wider cycle away from that 24 hours is so powerful, and it has impacts on not as energy as I mentioned, but also the way you move your body. So you're not exercising the same way every day. You're really tuning into how you feel. We talked about nutrition earlier, but also even the way that you interact with others. So, there are times where you will feel a little bit more social. And that's typically as we're moving up towards ovulation, versus maybe right before your period or during your period is a time where we go into this kind of almost a hibernation, this kind of reflectiveness. We're more introspective. And this is when you honor this, a lot can come out of it, insights about yourself, insights about your relationship. But the main thing I think is to give yourself the space to have these insights and to start to tune in and not push away how you really feel.
Denying what we're feeling is, so much of this work. This is a theme that's come up in this conversation again and again. And like you said, we've sort of been programmed to push through and keep going. And this is the messaging that we receive. And I'm curious, just for someone who the idea that there are these 4 different phases that we can honor, how does someone figure that out for themselves? How do you know which phase that you're in? Because it sounds to me like, oh gosh, that sounds really complicated and it takes too much effort. I'm not going to take the time to figure that out. So I'm curious, is there an easy or accessible way for women to learn how to figure out which phase they're in?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do is to start on the first day of your period. The first day of your menstrual cycle is the first day of your period. And then from there, just note how you feel. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as, say, if you are a journaler, it's kind of day 1, and just note your energy, your mood, and that can be it. And then you kind of will start to notice the changes in your energy, in your mood, as you move throughout your cycle. Ovulation, you're moving away from using an app to tell you that you're ovulating, to noticing the physical signs that your body is giving you. So changes in like cervical fluid, which thicken as we move towards ovulation. And then finally we tail off and you just notice how you feel right before your period. A lot of us associate this time with PMS. And I love the idea of moving away from just calling this time PMS, because I find it very reductive. This idea that because you have a period, you're going to experience PMS. It's not true. It was actually premenstrual syndrome is invented in the 1950s by 2 British doctors. So you just notice how you feel. You might feel a little bit more anxious. You might feel maybe bloated, but just notice your symptoms and notice that you don't have to feel like that. And then from there, you start this cycle all over again. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You can use a journal, you can use apps, you can even just use kind of the notes app in your phone and just jot things down, like very simplistically.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And Priya, are there any practices that feel important to you to acknowledge, or that the cycle works with encouraging in terms of honoring these different phases or educating people on these different phases?
Yeah, as you were saying, Lauren, if you, an educated woman in the Western world, did not know about the 4 stages of the menstrual cycle till you were like in your late 20s or early 30s, obviously the women and girls that we work with have never heard about. In fact, even if we were to ask them what periods are all about, they would always say it's bad blood leaving the body, because that's what their grandmothers and mothers have taught them. So then we introduce this whole concept of menstruation and menstrual cycle and the 4 stages to them. And we try to keep it a little simple for them because, considering the, right now the vulnerable women are working like 14 hours, 16 hours a day, be it at their workplace or be it at home. Even younger girls have to probably cook because a mother has left for work early in the morning, or take care of a younger sibling till such time she goes to school. So chances are that they really don't have the time to even look at their bodies or observe the changes. The things that Linese talks about are really great things for each woman to know, but how many of them would have the luxury of time to spend with themselves to see what are the changes that are going through? Plus, the big problem that happens these days is because of various women, irrespective of what industry they may be in, what strata of the community they may be in, the challenges that they have with conception. So when they are not able to conceive naturally, then everybody around them is saying this is the period where you're likely to be overluting, go for it. And so like that, one, already the pressure and the anxiety is really, really high, which is offsetting all the positive energy that's flowing through them because of the spurt in estrogen. And second is this, pressure to perform and conceive, which kind of, makes the whole process mechanical, and it's like very test oriented, result oriented, that you're just not going through the natural processes of your body and allowing things to happen naturally, which I find is a big, big stress for women, particularly vulnerable women, because the women in probably urban cities, or women who have the purchasing power to go to private consultants or physicians, they might have the options of IVF and other things. Whereas for the vulnerable women, if they are not able to deliver a child within 2 or 3 years of marriage, clearly the husband will desert them, even if the problem was with the husband. And that would mean not just a problem of a failed marriage, it would also mean it would be a social problem, that woman would be ostracized. She can't go back to her mother's house. So it kind of becomes a very complicated situation for them. So for them, it's all about like having a baby as quickly as possible, whether they have the wherewithal to bring up that child and give it all the rights and privileges that the child requires, that becomes secondary. So under these circumstances, we talk to them in a manner that they would understand about about the various 4 stages. And we also talk to them about how there is the spurt in estrogen the first 15 days, and how the progesterone levels increase in the second 15 days, which kind of slows down their processes, kind of even their mental enthusiasm and energy start coming down. And we try and connect that with whatever pain or discomfort that they feel during menstruation, because clearly menstruation is not a disease. And what happens in vulnerable communities is, one, they don't have quality absorbance, that they can stay in school for 8 to 10 hours without changing in between, and there aren't very good toilets available in all the schools or workplaces. The second is when they have like discomfort, if they have a cramp, or if they have like back pain, or even tiredness, fatigue, they stop going to school. And then when you're losing out on 3 or 4 days of school every month, then the workload is increasing, the teacher is pressurizing them, slowly they start losing interest and they drop out of school. We still have 30% of girls in vulnerable communities who are dropping out of school when they have their menstruation. On one hand, it is this pain, discomfort, and distance of travel, and not having proper menstrual products and facilities. On the other hand, is this cultural belief, that you cannot take any medication or consult a gynecologist till such time you're married and you're expecting a child. Because the parents feel that if an unmarried girl goes to a gynecologist, even because she has like pain and discomfort during menstruation, she has overbleeding, she has PCOD symptoms, the parents immediately think the society will think this girl is having a child out of wedlock and she has probably gone there for an abortion. Because of that, Health seeking behavior is zero. And we recently did a study with the vulnerable women, 8,000 vulnerable women, about incidence of menstrual disorders in them. 85% of women have said that women are supposed to bear the pain and discomfort and do nothing about it.
Mm.
That's because this is what has been taught to them. This is what they are practicing. This is what they'll tell their children as well, unless we go and tell them that you have a right to quality of life. You have a right to health seeking behavior. You have a right to be comfortable, whether you're ovulating, whether you are having your periods, or whether you're just, existing. Now, that is the main message for us. And we keep reiterating it in every forum that we have with the younger girls, with the older women. And today, the good thing is because we are going and meeting them again and again, the lockdown was an excellent opportunity for us to meet the girls with their families. In fact, it was the grandmothers who have completed their menstrual cycle who came forward and said, we went through all this because nobody stood up for us. Today, we will stand up for you so that you go and take your medication, you go and get rest, you go to school and do your education so that you're able to purchase at least pads for yourself. You don't have to wait or ask permission from your father or your husband to get even sanitary pads.
Oh, Priya, you've touched on so much in there that is so significant. I was just reading sort of a history of women around the world and just this cultural messaging that we've received across the planet that women somehow are supposed to be the ones that experience this pain, and that is not unique to India. It's not unique to the West, that you see this on a global scale, and really how, as a result of functioning in this global patriarchy or hierarchy, we're diminishing these experiences that we're having. And as you said, not going and seeking support or help. And that we see this in vulnerable communities, and we see this, in not so vulnerable communities, where women turn to each other and say, why did no one tell me? Why did no one talk to me about this? Why am I just understanding this now as I'm older? And I thought about this when I became a mother, and I looked back and all the people who were becoming mothers, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I had to go on that journey. And then it was from that place that I wanted to look back at the people on the precipice of motherhood and say, I'm here, how can I serve? So hearing about the grandmothers rising up and, being there for the next generation, and all, it makes me teary. It just is, it's the potential that we have, right, as women, as we move through these cycles, to really rise up and love and support each other and understand that there is help and there is support, and we don't have to go through these things alone. And I think about that in my own yoga journey, which, we haven't touched on yet. When I was in my early 20s, I was studying with an older teacher who was probably menopausal at that time. And I was in a big room with lots of students.
We've lost Lauren.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, especially Lanice as a yoga teacher, how do you view changing the physical practice, and what are some of the shifts in the physical practice that you encourage people to acknowledge and move through, no matter what their physical experience of their menstrual cycle might be?
I think it's really interesting what you said about honoring where you are. And it's really important as a yoga teacher to not go into a practice with preconceived notions of what you want people to do with their bodies, but really honor them as a whole person coming into the practice and allowing them to find their own space. So I always say, don't adjust your body for the pose, make the pose fit into what's going on in your body in that moment. So, we talk, just thinking about what I said earlier about energy, I talk a lot about honoring your energy during different phases. And this definitely applies to yoga, as in terms of the physical side of yoga, the asana practice, where during your period, don't have this expectation that you are going to be able to do a very vigorous Ashtanga practice, but also don't beat yourself up if you're not able to kind of do what you what you would do during ovulation. But also remember that yoga isn't just about the physical practice. There are the different other limbs of yoga that you can tap into that are just as important and just as powerful for your physical and emotional health. So really looking at yourself as a whole person and remembering your yoga practice beyond just the asana during each of the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle. So if during ovulation, we would typically think, I've got a lot of energy, I'm going to jump into a really intensive practice. But that's also the time where you can really tap into a great pranayama practice to kind of channel that energy and not just completely expend it, or tap into kind of meditation or mindfulness to bring a sort of stillness to a time where you might feel a little frenetic. So looking at this from a more rounded perspective is really powerful.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah. And I noticed for myself over the years, it's shifted and changed so much. And now postpartum and getting closer to my 40s, that it's actually in the days after my cycle. I love this idea that you spoke about, a bank, right? This is something we need to invest. We need to have this investment. And I can feel really good. And then those couple of days after, I need to be really tender with my energy, right? I need to fill that bank back up. And so for us, just to kind of have this understanding that over time we're growing and changing, and what we need in each phase might shift and change. And really, this is the key to femininity, right? Of the feminine principle. We've gotten so caught in being fiery or being grounded in the earth element. And I know for myself, it's almost like we've forgotten the fluidity, right? We've forgotten the water element that is so key to every human being, but especially to women. And that these are things that are going to be fluid and adaptable month to month if we're really paying attention to how we're feeling and how we're doing. And Priya, I'm wondering if there are certain practices, and they might not be physical practices, that you work with people to integrate into their lives. Is there a perspective in terms of these physical practices or other aspects of practice that you're encouraging or educating people with?
Yes. Earlier on, there was a lot of physical activity for children, be it in school or be it in their households, where they spent a lot of time, as Lenise was saying, in natural sunlight, where they were getting the vitamin D, they were, working out naturally. So the physical exercise part was taken care of. But then with lockdown and with all government schools not operating for the last 2.5 years, what has happened is their screen time has increased considerably. And this increase in screen time has become a habit, because at those days or those months, they required that screen time to stay updated with schoolwork, and because all the classes were happening digitally. Even in government schools, there are a lot of worksheets which had to be completed and then sent via WhatsApp to the teachers and all of that. But then now, because they've got their own digital devices, now they have like internet, the idea of doing physical activity or the idea of getting together, playing a game, or spending more time outdoors has reduced considerably. And that is why we find that children and women have put on a lot of weight. And so because of that, weight related discomfort and weight related problems are also surfacing. So we are kind of moving them back into doing physical activities. It could be a general, walk, general stretching exercises. They don't even have to be like trained in something. It need not be trained in yoga or trained in something, whatever mass drill exercises that they learn in school. Even that, if they can do like half an hour in the morning or 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, because now they have a lot of catching up to do as far as academics are concerned, because now the bridge courses are on to make them catch up with the 2 year syllabus that they have lost. So which means there are tests every week, there are exams every month. So there's a lot of this activity going on. But on the other hand, we are kind of making them realize that physical activity is equally important. And physical activity need not necessarily mean you need to be trained in it. You need to have a dedicated space to perform it in your house, or equipment to do that, or go to a gym. Nothing at all. It's just that you play an active game or a sport outside or in your school playground, get together with friends, and then have some physical activities, or just do plain brisk walking or stretching exercises in your own backyard or your own terrace or something like that. And that, we kind of, everything goes back to achieving maximum with what is available.
And this was such one of the great gifts I felt that came out of COVID was I returned to walking. And I was walking like 7 miles a day. My daughter was 6 weeks old when COVID hit. And I was like, okay, popped her into a wrap and went outside. And I was walking about 7 miles a day. And people would say things to me that, are inappropriate these days, but, oh, you lost so much weight. How did you lose so much weight so quickly? I didn't do anything. I didn't pick up a weight, besides a baby weight. I didn't pick up a physical weight. I didn't go to a physical gym. I had no equipment. I was just out walking. And there's just so much research that shows there's no better form of exercise than a brisk walk. I was just listening to a leading researcher, an MD here in the US, whose focus is on longevity. And one of the things that he spoke to is if you are completely sedentary, which so many people we found during the course of the pandemic became sedentary. We had to work from home and homeschool and sit at home. We didn't have anywhere to go. That just adding an hour-long brisk walk 3 times a week could have significant benefits to your health. So just this really important reminder that you can be doing something, with your children, you can be doing something with a friend or a partner, or please, by all means, by yourself, right? Go and have an hour-long walk. And what a gift that is for then balancing your hormones, being at a healthy weight for you and your body, getting the vitamin D, being out in nature, and all of the benefits that come from that for these different things that we're talking about. So I just really appreciate that reminder that just like Mother Earth is here giving us what we need, this body is here and we can use it as a conduit to really care for ourselves without having to add a bunch of extra stuff to it. Well, I'm just wondering from either one of you, in terms of this overarching conversation about periods and practices, to help us really understand and discover practices that can help us through these different cycles, are there any last things that maybe we haven't touched on that you're interested in adding?
I would say just to remember that having a period is normal, and there's a lot of shame that is tied up in the way we talk about periods. There's a lot of fear, and even things like and I'm sure that you can relate to this idea of hiding a tampon or hiding the pad when you go to the bathroom. And conversations like this are so powerful because they start to or continue to normalize periods. 50% of the global population has or has had a period every menstrual month. And that's a significant number. We need to start to and continue to move away from the shame and taboo around this perfectly normal and natural bodily function.
Thank you.
I would just like to add to what Lini said, because till such time we involve the men into conversations of menstruation, we are going to be fighting that battle alone. Because unless and until, if you really have to normalize periods, if it really has to be like purchasing groceries at home, or someone for having a cold or a cough, it will only happen when the men know as much about menstruation as we do. And that is now slowly happening in the younger generations. Clearly, in nuclear families, if the partners are just staying together, the male partner pretty much has to take care of the female partner, irrespective of whether they know about it, don't know about it. Like buying supplies for them, or cooking on those days, or generally not bothering them much. All of that they understand. But I think the larger communities, particularly in more conservative settings as in India, like the fathers, the uncles, the teachers, whenever we go to schools and do teacher training, the people who immediately say, how can we help the girls, is always the male teachers. They have not been able to help because they did not have the information, not because they did not want to help. Because the female teachers would always be talking about, once you start talking about menstruation to them, they are connecting about the things that happened to them when they started their menarche. What are the things that are happening to them now? So it's all about themselves, not about the children. Whereas the men immediately come forward and say, what can I do if a child attains menarche in my class? So I think we are kind of not opening that door wide enough to include men into menstruation conversations. Once we start doing that, the stigma and the shame and all of that will start getting out of that door pretty quickly than we expect.
Thank you for that reminder, Priya. This is half of our globe. This is half of our population. And what we know is we're in it together, and we need to support each other, and we need the men, right? We need the men to uplift and educate. So I really appreciate that reminder. Thank you so much for joining in this final conversation of this 3-part series with Interdimension TV and the Cycle. I want to remind everyone who's joining in to watch this conversation that you can go to Interdimension TV, you can sign up for a membership, or go to Interdimension Academy and purchase any of our online trainings. Use the code CYCLE, CYCLE, and 50% of your purchase is going to go directly to supporting everything that this incredible organization is doing. So ladies, thank you so much for participating in this chat, and I look forward to watching and being a part of all the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, and on behalf of myself and the Cycle, for supporting all our work and being a big ambassador. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lenise. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.